Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Renee Wyckoff, Research Design Engineer at L&E Research. Thanks again for joining us today for the next webinar in our series of webinars hosted by L&E in 2018. Our webinar series focuses on the 6 steps to perfect qual, and today's webinar will focus specifically on emerging methods in qualitative research technology. Our webinar series ties in with our white paper series as well, so we'll be sending out a copy of the white paper in addition to the recording of this webinar, should you be interested in revisiting or sharing it with your colleagues that couldn't attend. Before we get started, I want to mention that we'll be taking questions and answering them at the end of the webinar. So let's kick it off and get started with our 2 guest speakers. Why don't we start with Charlie Rader of Procter & Gamble.
Hi, Renee. Yeah, so I'm Charlie. I've been at P&G working in consumer research on the R&D side of life for going on 24 years now. My title for LinkedIn is Digital Insights Designer. I certainly like figuring out how we can use digital to impact our research and learn from consumers. And so I've been involved with digital since roughly 2008, and you guys couldn't have picked a more perfect topic for me to chat on, because I have a lot of passion in this area.
I guess it's my cue, Renee.
Excellent.
That's your
Thanks, Charlie. Next up, we have Lenny Murphy, Executive Editor and Producer at Green Book.
Before I introduce myself, though, Charlie left out that he is also a star of the stage in the Cincinnati, most recently starring as the MC in Cabaret. So.
Well, then I'll say, Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome to the webinar.
Oh boy! Thanks, Charlie.
How many webinars will you ever hear that? So,
you will never hear this on another webinar ever, I promise.
And obviously, Charlie and I have known each other for a long time as well. So, but I'm Lenny Murphy. I'm the Executive Editor and Producer at Green Book. I'm sure most of you know me because you probably receive tons of emails with my name attached to them on a daily or weekly basis. But primarily, my role is to function as an analyst and an instigator in the research space, trying to drive innovation across the entire industry in a variety of ways, and certainly paying attention to qualitative technology, and as that's changing and expanding is a key focus area as well. So like Charlie, you couldn't have asked for a better topic, and I'm really happy to be here hanging out with all of you, and hopefully you'll feel the same way when we're done.
Excellent. Thanks, Lenny. We're really excited to have both of you today. So let's just get started, and we're going to come out of the gate with the big one. So with all of the new emerging technologies that are out there now, in each of your personal experiences, which one do you feel has recently made the most impact on the way we do research? Charlie, let's start with you.
Sure. So I know we're talking about online qual, but actually what I think has made the most impact has been kind of online quant in the way that we're using screening surveys to increase our reach, to reach consumers all over the globe, especially in the fact that we generally live out our qual lives coming into facilities like at L&E, talking to people face to face, but as we expand that, people can't always meet us, in the researcher's time. I like to say that they can meet us a lot more in their own time, and so thinking about asynchronous research versus synchronous research, it's meeting consumers in their time when they're ready to share their lives. I think those are some of the biggest pieces of technology that has changed qual. Probably for me, I remember doing a online group, and we had a woman from Alabama. We were talking about oral care habits and practices, and first of all, the ability to reach out to folks and wherever they're at. People were able to run away from their phone and webcam, and then pull out, this is the brush that I use, this is the flosser that I use, was transforming. But more importantly, this lady from Alabama was probably 3 hours from her closest, major market city, which means if it wasn't for the reach of the internet, we would never get to speak with her. We'd never get to understand what her needs are. We'd only get to hear from people that can drive to a facility at our location and choosing. I'll turn that over to Lenny.
Thanks, Charlie. And
Thanks, Charlie.
yeah, I think you're spot on. I'd take it a little bit broader and say the integration of digital and all that entails, right? Some leveraging the power of automation for recruiting, whether you're utilizing in-person groups or virtual groups, plus all of the new tools and methods that have been created through the integration of digital to do kind of the best of both worlds and optimize the traditional in-person paradigm as well as the digital-only paradigm, of communities and ethnography and all of those things. I said a few years ago that I thought this was the golden age of qual, and I still stand by that. We get a lot of value in digital technology and automation on the quant side, and that helped us learn how to optimize those things and apply them to address real efficiencies in the process within qual as a whole. I think it's just a gold mine now of new cool ways to engage with consumers and the technology to manage those interactions and the data as well, so that qualitative can function almost as efficiently as quant can today.
Thanks, Lenny. I just want to back up a little bit and ask Charlie a question. Charlie, so would you say that one of the big impacts is being able to reach out to and pull in people that we might not have been able to talk to before without it? Oh
yeah, absolutely. That's pretty critical. I don't know. I'm having a bit of feedback. Let me turn my mic down a little bit. That is exactly right. While being able to learn from the consumer has been always important and key for us, it is the fact that we don't have to, especially for smaller incidents types of recruiting, we don't have to be reliant on how many needles are in this particular geography's haystack. We can connect people from all over the country and even all over the world to find out those hard to find recruits, like people who recently switched from one brand to another or something like that. It is super helpful for us to be able to use the internet and use digital research among our respondents in that way.
And just one more for you, Charlie. What kinds of technologies is P&G using or evaluating right now? Like, what are you looking at?
As we kind of talked through a number of these things, we have a wide variety of research partners and technologies. Sometimes we have built them. I was early on in a video analytics tool that we built internally to P&G, but now there's great offerings from the likes of Living Lens, folks like Focus Vision's Video Insight, Discuss.io, where we're using video to transform the way that we talk to consumers, and more importantly, how to analyze that. So there's plenty of tech on video that I'm very interested in, and that's kind of been definitely one of my passion areas. But the fact is that we're using mobile diaries. While that isn't necessarily, it can be both quant and qual. But getting to that moment when people are experiencing your product. Maybe in my intro, I'll kind of back up and say, what I do at P&G and R&D is we call the function products research. It is responsible for understanding the consumer and product interaction both in the home and even some at the shelf. Those experiences, and so being able to understand the consumer in those places in that moment is super key. I currently have responsibilities in our FemCare area, but had a stint in corporate. But the point is that as we think about behavioral and more behavioral approaches, rather in our research, being more observational rather than attitudinal and very rational, and having a diary, having a mobile questionnaire available at the moment people are experiencing things or shortly thereafter can really help reduce what I call the recall gap, that gap between when people experience our products and when they get to give us the feedback about how did it go. In FemCare, it's a sensitive environment, and so it's sometimes difficult to articulate, sometimes difficult to think about or even want to consider. And so having mobile at that point is critical and crucial technology for us, something that I use in my lab every day.
Thanks, Charlie.
That went far afield.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you. It's great information. It's good to know. Thank you. Let's have the next one for you, Lenny, to start out with. Are there any technologies that are sort of in their infancy right now that you see making a big impact on qual down the road, and in what way?
Well, there's a few. I think certainly video, I would still say, is maybe toddlerhood, not quite infancy, but the opportunities to leverage video, and particularly the analytics side of that, I think we're just beginning to tap into it. I even saw something earlier this week that Facebook is going to start analyzing memes. Well, what does that mean from a research standpoint, right? If we can adapt that technology to have people compile memes about their experience, that's a whole other thing that I don't think we've even touched on yet, right? So I think there'll be exponential growth in how we utilize unstructured data, right? In its various forms, particularly around video and images and anything related to that, that can deliver a lot of insight. The non-conscious measurement as a component of that is also in its infancy, although it's mainstream from a qualitative standpoint. It certainly exists alongside qual for a while. Again, technology is driving scalability of that. So I was on a call yesterday with a company called EMAL that is exploring leveraging there's a body of knowledge that shows the gestures that we use in touch and the intensity of the touch equates to emotional states. So that's the next great, potentially the next great thing similar to facial scanning, right? It's a new biometric method, and we'll find more and more of those, of ways to augment what we do from a research standpoint with non-conscious data to drive more insight. And then I'm a big fan of blockchain right now. Full disclosure, I actually spent most of the morning on conference calls on talking about blockchain with folks. It's very much top of mind, but I think that not so much that has implications on the process of methodology. I think it has immense implications for the relationships that researchers and brands have with consumers and how they leverage their data, and they can be very transformative in terms of what that paradigm looks like. Where today it's a very transactional process. Research is inherently, hey, give us X amount of time to do this task, answer a survey, you get to come to a group, and you get $50 or whatever the number is, right? The opportunity actually is there around blockchain to change that paradigm where consumers are owning and leveraging their most ready asset, which is their personal data and engagement, in a new way, and becomes a much more reciprocal relationship versus kind of a one-way transaction. So those are the three biggies. So the new technology around video, non-conscious measurement, and blockchain in just terms of how we engage with consumers.
Thanks, Lenny. Can you follow that, Charlie?
Following Lenny is always a hard gig anyway. But, I'd say for me, it's some things in AI, and I don't mean adult incontinence. I'm talking about
the world that you live in, right, Charlie?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, AI meaning how we're having these deep learning technologies, or machine learning, or deep learning, all these various forms. I'll just kind of wrap up into AI, but the impact that it is bringing to many qual technologies, because it's so the data that we have is unstructured, whether it's unstructured text or unstructured video, and the images in the video there. Having a machine be able to sort through the mountains of data that we can generate in online qual, which I think is often a surprise for our researchers when they first encounter it, which is they're used to going out for 2 or 3 days of in homes or one-on-one interviews or some groups along the way, and they've narrowed their work into that kind of a time set. But when you do online, you can be at your desk and you can walk in first thing on Monday morning, and you can have 100 responses because you've had people do blogging exercises or a video tour of their home. It's a lot of data that can be you can be overwhelmed with, and so AI sorting through that is certainly very helpful. And I think not only in the video space, where automatic transcriptions and linking that to the video so you can quickly sort through and find the best bits is there. What I think is really kind of starting to happen, and I saw a company at IIEX this past summer thematically, where they're looking at artificial intelligence analysis, text analysis of smaller data sets that we typically encounter in qualitative research, where we would do a dozen, 2 dozen interviews. Those interview sets aren't often well managed or even sized for what we've been traditionally thinking of automated text analytics, social media data where you can scrape, or ratings and reviews where you scrape large, thousands to millions of rows of data, and then you can do a lot of statistics on those to understand those things. I think where AI is starting to lead us is to gain quick understanding in these smaller bodies of data that I think is really super interesting to me as a qualitative researcher.
I think you beat me, Charlie. So that was a good answer.
Yeah, they were both really good answers. Thanks very much. So in your opinions, and I don't even want to say new technologies, are there any technologies that are underutilized right now that you feel that researchers should be using more or should have in their toolkit?
Why don't you do that, Charlie?
All right.
I'm not going to follow up on you. So go ahead.
So I think there's a couple in this space. The first one I'll hit is as I kind of alluded to earlier about mobile and being in that moment. But I think what's underutilized is sometimes people see mobile qual or the boards that folks like Focus Vision or 2020 Research, their qual board technologies, or AHA, all these platforms which can grab this data. I think that sometimes people think of it as they have to do it in they have to do a multi-geography, multi-segmented research, and I think it's underutilized because that seems daunting. I encourage researchers that I'm dealing with to start small in utilizing those spaces for homework assignment before we meet them face to face, before they can then say, well, now I know how to think in an online qual way to be able to link them. But these places of small engagement, whether that's the take a picture of where you store your product, what are the best packages that you love and love to interact with. So mobile and online qual boards are a key part of that. And then I think the other thing that is underutilized and something that we've been trying to put new life into at P&G is to do search before research, and recognizing that we have a treasure trove of data that we've already expensively recruited, researched, probably recorded, most likely recorded, but we don't have a great way to access that information. And so creating libraries of our video research on platforms like I've mentioned, like Living Lens, Big Sofa. We've been working with vendors to create these libraries of our video data, and then more importantly, even wrapping it up into other knowledge management tools like Knowledge Hound, where we're getting our quant data linked in with that as well. Those pieces of what do you have first? What can you learn first? And even in that space, have you looked at any social media posts, or have you looked at your ratings and reviews lately before going and doing the next primary research of bringing people together? So encouraging people to learn first with what we have before, and then we can ask even more intelligent questions when we do have people that we recruit to our active research projects.
Yeah, nodding vigorously, and like the first question, I'll take it just a step broader. I think that the idea that you touched on data synthesis. Yeah, and there are so many data assets that are available. That can inform the questions. We always think in terms of as research as a defined question set that we ask for the first time. But we haven't asked for the first time. We've probably, from the consumer's perspective, they've probably answered those questions 1,000 times. Now, whether they did that for P&G, that's a different issue, right? But P&G more likely already has some of that data, and the consumer already has that data available in other ways through other relationships they have, not just social data, but our data exhaust has an immense amount of behavioral data that can be analyzed and can help point us in the right direction, so that when we do ask the questions, we're filling in the knowledge gaps versus creating the knowledge or recreating the knowledge over and over again. And it's a huge opportunity for researchers and for the research industry on the supplier side to help drive more value around the consumer's data graph, if you will, which, talking about, I'm excited about blockchain, that's part of that idea, right? Of, how do we synthesize these data sets into central locations and central IDs, so that our research efforts can be far more focused and actionable on filling in gaps of information versus trying to recreate information that already exists in the past.
Thanks, guys. So the next one, are there any technologies on the horizon that you've seen, either of you, that might not be used for qualitative right now, but you feel could be applied in some way in the future?
Let me take that one first, Charlie.
Sure.
All right, so I know you have an opinion on this. AR and VR. The problem with those technologies are they're not scalable, right? They're not prepackaged and productized in a way that makes it really efficient to drive usage. But that'll change. So and AR specifically is easy to it's just as easy to utilize AR as today we use video on our phones, right? The devices we all carry with us have the innate capability to leverage augmented reality from that standpoint. And eventually VR will reach critical mass, not just in the gaming community or the entertainment community, but as a consumer solution for education, interaction, and entertainment. So we should begin thinking about that as we migrated from the in-person paradigm of research to the digital paradigm. The next iteration of digital will be something like AR and VR. So we need to start thinking about that now and experiment with it as it reaches critical mass and maturity as technology to allow for scalability and cost efficiencies.
Thanks, Lenny.
Yeah, so I'll pick up, which is yeah, I think we're a little bit early in the hype cycle on AR and VR, but certainly we need to understand and start experimenting with those places. And for us in P&G, we make stuff. That's what we do. We're the makers of Tide and Pampers and Dawn. And so we want to, deliver great consumer experiences with stuff, but, where are the places where we can digitally enhance a consumer's experience of those things? I don't see P&G immediately becoming the software company of the future, but I think the fact of how can we help people understand how best to use our products, how to experience them, and maybe as people are searching on the web for understanding of what to choose, an AR or a VR product or experience could be a part of that. But right now, the VR spaces are in maybe a shopping experience, and how does that translate a digital shopping experience, which has its values in being able to quickly change and reset and try a different configuration. But as a guy who's very much more interested in behavior, I don't know if those 2D or even 3D-ish experiences really engender the right level of emotion and stimulus in people. And then I guess to answer the question directly rather than just respond to Lenny, I think there is understanding of how we're going to be able to use data in voice, and then in blockchain. I think as Lenny and I have been chatting a little bit about this as well. It's not something that is readily part of the product, but we want to get better panelist quality and responses, and a better experience for both the company like P&G as well as for the consumer who's participating. And blockchain may be a great way of getting at that. So it's definitely in the horizon area, but there's still plenty of technology to go in just how we deal with all of the data that we are gathering these days.
Got it.
Renee, can I ask Charlie a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask Charlie a question of follow-up that made me think of 3D printing? Think of that experience of, there's the digital
additive manufacturing, yes.
Simulations. Yes, right. So, for rapid prototyping or for more experiential stuff, I could see 3D printing being something that could be really interesting. Have you guys experiment with that, or have you any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And we do a lot of 3D printing in our package prototyping areas, just to get new designs out there and put it into the hands of people. There's plenty of it's easy to get a 2D representation that you could do a max diff on, but having great 3D printing capabilities, and I just saw a great TED talk that basically created a geodesic shape in like less than 10 minutes. That was 2 inches tall or something like that was amazing to see. I think those technologies are there. I think there's certainly experimentation and thoughts about how do we utilize these technologies for individualization, personalization of folks' experience, and I think there's a number of places where we're looking into, and certainly can't say where all those experiments are, but are we experimenting? Yeah, and I think that there's some really great ways in how people are experiencing what could be the future, and not saying, imagine if the product looked like this. We could just print it in a day or less and have it in front of them.
So Renee, you guys need to install 3D printers in all your facilities.
We will get right on that.
Okay. That's very cool, Charlie. Thank you.
So Charlie,
let me just follow up with that, which is that we're kind of laughing about that, but if you think about when we go and do work with consumers, sometimes they're like, hey, print off this new deck. We've made some changes to the concept, and now we want to show them this, or those kinds of rapid prototyping. A maker bot of some kind, I can see being installed at a great variety of facilities. I don't see that too far off, actually. So
yeah,
that's really interesting.
Very cool.
So Charlie, I just wanted to ask you one question to follow up. So you were talking about AR or VR. How would either of those technologies help P&G find out something about a consumer that you might not have been able to learn before?
It's a great question, and this is where the behaviorist in me says, is there enough actual signal or stimulation in what we're showing in those in a VR space? We know that certainly we watch videos and they can engender certain levels of emotion and reaction, but it's certainly muted in comparison to actually experiencing a product. So the question is where are the places where a VR rendering engine can maybe show us different material properties or different viscosities of a liquid, or how something pours or behaves in a video or 3D kind of experience that people can get into. But right now it could be a demonstration of technology, a reason to believe of how something works, much more than I think a way to provide a direct stimuli. I'm a little bit skeptic in how VR can get us there in some ways, but we're still pretty much in the infancy. The adoption of headsets and whatnot is still pretty low. And so in order to do research in those spaces, then we have to come up with half a dozen headsets to ship around. So very much in the way that we do a lot of behavioral and biometrics pieces, where we're beholden to who has the hardware. So it's still a little bit off for me, at least. I'm happy to learn if people have other experiences and can teach us. That would be great.
Thanks, Charlie. So with some of the new technologies, how are some of them changing the way we analyze data? How about you, Lenny?
Yeah, well, I think Charlie touched on there's certainly the AI component, right, to be able to ingest and organize data more efficiently than we have been able to do in the past. And yeah, the unstructured data, whether it's text or Charlie brought up voice or images, those certainly have embedded in them are analytical components, and that's the really kind of the tip of the spear, is to be able to analyze that information more efficiently. So I think we're getting far more efficient across the board at at utilizing lots of different data types and sources without the need for extensive amounts of human interaction just to get it ready to look at, right? The days of spending hours and hours coding open ends, for instance, or even transcription. The technology, it's not perfect, but it's gotten a lot better at creating real efficiencies there and making that stuff manageable. Where I think that we haven't, the next step of that is visualizing and reporting the data. We're still kind of fundamentally stuck in kind of traditional charts and graphs. There's not huge, I'm not aware of any technologies that, for instance, can create all of the elements of an infographic on the fly. There's pieces that have element libraries, but it still requires a human to be able to pull those things together and craft that. So it's more efficient, but it's not the optimal solution. So I think the next great step for any of the solutions that are offering analytical capabilities is a way to streamline that process to create that in a graphically interesting way. And here's the real kicker: 80% of all research projects are still done in PowerPoint. Or rather, the reporting are still done in PowerPoint. That is the standard. So all of the online dashboard solutions is fantastic, but when we're looking at discrete projects, integration with PowerPoint is a must. It just is. So we're not there yet where PowerPoint is not the default. My friends at Office Reports, for instance, they built tried to mimic the solution set of SPSS within the Office environment, and that's a huge, great step from an efficiency standpoint. But they're still kind of limited to what Office can do. So there's an opportunity for Microsoft to step up and address some of these issues as well, to help power some better solutions around not just the analysis, but also the presentation of information in this standard platform that we all use. Charlie, are most of the P&G projects still delivered in PowerPoint?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and even when it's qual and we have video bits, we're not generally going back to a partner platform and viewing those videos in that space. We're taking that clip and we're linking it or embedding it into the PowerPoint. So yeah, we're definitely locked into a PowerPoint mentality. Although my own boss, he loves Prezi, and I experimented with Microsoft Sway. The fact is that those are all right now just experimentations, and in trying to break the PowerPoint paradigm. But yeah, I mean, there's so much that in visualizations, which we respond as humans much more to visuals than certainly tables of data. But in the qualitative space, we have these basic blocks of text data, image data, video data that the analysis for understanding and finding insight out of images is growing and growing. So I'm thinking of folks like Glimpse-It, as well as some new entrants in this area. In video analytics can say, I was looking at Georama just the other day, and they're like, hey, these are videos that were taken inside. These are videos taken in a store. These are video. And I'm like, we haven't added that metadata in there. It's doing deep learning and can recognize these context pieces, which are super important in recognizing in the qualitative research methodologies, because context is king in so many ways. I think of just how going from a Wordle kind of a thing to the work that we're doing in a number of these spaces to make those word clouds even more intelligent. we have as our basic data analysis package, we use JMP software, and their latest iteration, or maybe 2 generations ago, started doing. They had a bag of words text explorer, and we could have the ability for it to create a word cloud, but that word cloud being that much more intelligent, and then more importantly, drilling back into where those instances of quotes are in the body of data, so that they're properly classified in those ways. So being able to allow the algorithms to do their work, but then you can then link it back all the way to the original quotation and do some verification on whether it's properly classified. I think is allowing us to toggle between those things, but having the ability to share a story, and like I said, video is a passion area of mine. Being able to present video and making the work of looking through the data, looking through hours of what you've experienced as a moderator or in the back room as a client, and then turning those insights into story that our project teams can then go act on, is super vitally important. And so it's the analysis tools that are allowing us to make better decisions, and that's ultimately what we need to do. We need to make great decisions based off of our conversations and interactions with our consumers, and that's what Qual is great at. While there is these aspects of data crunching that goes along with it, Qual ultimately needs to get back to the human, and whether it's video for behavioral observation, to understand those consumer design pieces, usability pieces, those things are helpful in getting us to those insights and those answers, because so much of, we can just be deluged in data. So much of these qualitative platforms, whether it's text or images or video, getting the data is almost table stakes these days. There's very little, I think, innovation in how we get data from consumers, because there's these basic data types that we're getting, with maybe the exception of some folks that are doing 360 video, which is and streaming it while they're at it. Again, I'll call out Gioramo, who I saw was some innovation on the data gathering end, but it's in the analysis end where folks like Battery, which is a local Cincinnati startup here, have taken and digitized the analysis. So if you're kind of an old school qualitative researcher and you're used to putting up some chart pads and then moving around some post-its on the huddle room door, that's been virtualized in Battery's back room very nicely. So there's a variety of ways to get to this analysis that we've certainly progressed beyond I'd say a Web 2.0 or a Web 3.0. I don't know what the latest buzzword on that is, but I think there's some really great work in improving our analysis and then helping us to drive stories to act on that data.
Thanks, Charlie. Just a quick question, and then we're gonna start taking some questions from our listeners. I heard you mention word cloud a few times. Can you explain a little bit more about what that is and what its purpose is?
Well, a word cloud for the most part is a pretty picture. It's just that frequency counts of words, and maybe you've gotten the next level of sophistication that takes out all the these and ands, and if we're talking about diapers, we take out diaper out of the word. But I think there's some value, because we react to a visual of words in that way. So the word cloud is sometimes can be analytically irrelevant if it's not done right, if it doesn't have something behind it. So if you're not analyzing and putting together the bag of words that go into the word cloud, or that you're providing some secondary level of information by color coding beyond just the frequency, I think it often just is, hey, isn't this neat? We can, we put together all these open-ended responses, and here it says wow or something like that. It's all part of the infographic thrust to be able to share our data in a more intelligent way. And humans learned how to read, but they certainly understood seeing things and reacting to visual things before.
Yeah, it's kind of a shortcut to coding, I think. We've used it in Grid. Yeah, I resisted coding open ends in Grid for years, and so we defaulted to text analytics to kind of categorize and cluster and develop themes out of the responses and present those in the word clouds. That's kind of the standard presentation model. But it's not a replacement for in-depth analysis and even for coding as well. So I think we have to recognize that it has its place, absolutely, and it is visually compelling. But there's still times, even in Grit, we had to revert back to coding some of the open ends. Right? There's still you could do more with taking that text data and applying code frames, and that opened up the door to other kind of analytical and visualization capabilities as well. So I think we still have a ways to go to find the happy medium between the two.
All right, thanks so much, guys. This has been really, really good. So thanks for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. We're going to take some questions for the next few minutes, but first we'd like to thank Focus Forward, our transcription partner, who so graciously volunteered to transcribe this webinar for free. Focus Forward is just one of our technology partners that we partner with to bring a complete qualitative toolkit to our clients. We will be emailing out this recording, and you can view this webinar or download a copy of this free transcript at our website, as well as learn about all of our exciting technologies offered through L&E Solutions at www.leresearch.com. So let's get started with some questions, because I have a feeling.
Before you start, can I just give a shout out to L&E and their approach to dealing with technology in this way? I find it very refreshing to recognize that, and P&G needs to do this as well, that we can't be all things to all people. And so finding the best solutions in a variety of areas and offering that to your clients is super helpful. And that's something that I appreciate when I work with L&E. So there's your shout out for how we L&E. But I think it's a great approach to this.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you.
Yeah, it certainly sets you apart from other folks in the competitive set.
Thanks. That's our leader, Brett Watkins. He's a trailblazer, so we can thank him for that. So we're gonna start some questions. We have quite a few. If for some reason we don't get to them all, we can certainly answer them after the webinar is over. So we're going to start with the first one, and let's try to keep this one, because I know that we can probably go on and on about this. But the first question is about blockchain technology. Someone wants us to just kind of give a brief description of what it is. Please.
Go for it.
Yeah. At its core, blockchain is a distributed ledger of transactions. And that distribution component is important because that makes it relatively immutable. It's difficult to hack or change. That is the core. So to think about how it applies within anything it's being talked about, right? It's not a replacement for a traditional database. It is what it is an augmentation to the idea of a transactional ledger system. That's at least in my mind, that's the core way to think about it. so that requires you to think about the applications of a transaction within a business or personal process flow. And that's where we start getting to the benefits of how blockchain can be applied. Now, but there's a separate, I know so to keep it short, blockchain does not mean Bitcoin, and it does not by default mean cryptocurrency. There's three separate but related components, which is the distributed ledger, which can power a token, which the token is the representation of the transaction. That token can then, because it holds the value of the transaction, can be used to develop a alternative currency system. And that currency can be as simple as reward points or whatever, right? It doesn't have to be dollars. But those are separate but related issues. I think the explosion of cryptocurrencies left most people thinking, oh, blockchain is just Bitcoin. That is not the case. Although blockchain was inspired and built off of the core technology that powered Bitcoin initially. But it does have separate functionality outside of the cryptocurrency markets.
Thanks, Lenny. Let's see, what is the next one? Sorry about that. We have someone asking, what happened with neuroscience? Are companies still using it?
Yeah, I mean, the last grit data showed that when you look at kind of non-conscious measurement, which is my term for that bucket of techniques, collectively, that it's reached maturity levels. Now, the discrete individual applications of, let's say, EEG or facial scanning or biometric results or implicit, they have smaller adoption rates as discrete techniques, but the broad bucket is certainly widespread. Charlie, I think you guys, I mean, you were early adopters of, of neuromarketing, of EEG labs, but you still do quite a bit of it, right?
So yeah, I mean, we do biometric work and research, and the funny thing is that while the webinar here talked a little bit about neuromarketing, we didn't touch on it yet, but L&E is talking about the MindSight direct by Isobar, or they also showed had brought in Isobar for virtual reality biometric measurement, so that you could do eye tracking within the VR environment, which is, otherwise, you have a big visor in front of somebody's eyes. So by using the iMotions platform, Isobar has been able to utilize biometrics inside of that platform. But yeah, we at P&G want to make sure that we're understanding our consumer well, and sometimes it's in spaces like, even in my space of femcare, it's things that are hard to articulate. So we look to academia and look to the basis of behavioral psychology to understand the human response, which isn't always rational. We're very good oftentimes in P&Gs built on lots of rational survey taking, asking direct questions, but that's a good basis and foundation for understanding what people want. But sometimes when it gets to aesthetic things, sometimes when it gets to things that are just hard to get at, the qualitative researcher blends with the behavioral researcher in looking at these methods to get at how is a person responding to it, even if they can't recall that to the front of their mind. It's a hard task to realize that, if I asked you how many times did you eat eggs last month, or what are the last brands, those things of memory, it's a hard question to ask somebody. I mean, I get this question and I think, boy, that's stupid. I can't possibly answer that one. And that's why I need diaries and I need biometrics to get at those things. So yeah, we still do neuroscience, absolutely. I think like Lenny said, there's some limited levels of scaling that's possible there. And so we have to use those judiciously to get at questions that those things best address.
Thank you. Next question we have, how can market researchers in the qual space leverage such online activities as blogging and selfies in acquiring insights into consumers' lifestyles?
Charlie?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You have far better pragmatic examples.
Yeah, you know, and I think the fact is that we've used platforms, and I've referred to a number of those that, you know, we find selfies and blogging. It's the next level of ethnography, so to speak, self-ethnography, that people are observing themselves and reporting back what they're doing, what they're living, and what their conditions are. It enhances the context of understanding, you know, the whole person, and not just the minute research question that we have in mind. So yeah, we're definitely using all these tools and platforms to get at that broader context of a person. I think it was interesting that you're talking about Facebook analyzing memes, and it got me thinking about, you know, is that our next qualitative exercise for the digital native generation, that instead of speaking to us in words and text and blogs, that you know, they're gonna be giving us a derp as a response.
Yeah, memes and emojis, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not far off, because qualitative researchers have always done metaphorical image-based research, and so this is, you know, it's the next layer onto that.
Thanks, Charlie. Next question, any specific examples of how to use or implement these innovative approaches, where it would be helpful, where it might not be helpful? I know we've talked about a lot of different technologies, so what might be an example of using any of these technologies wouldn't be helpful?
Wouldn't be helpful?
Yeah.
Wouldn't be helpful. When might we want to lay off technology, and just let's start with an example of that.
I'll pick up with kind of the tail end of the neuroscience approach, which is, you know, you can eye track everything, but eye tracking kind of tells you what attention is, but not necessarily whether it's good or bad. And sometimes it may be an over-engineered approach. So, you know, to the technophobes that may be among the qualitative researchers out there, you know, not all is to be feared, but the impulse to say, do I need this, is well worth a consideration. Am I getting, you know, the same kind of data, but I don't have to, you know, run up a particular learning curve or try a new technology to get to that. To the same extent, though, if you're not recognizing the reach that online qual can give you to find those hard to find respondents and get them engaged in an asynchronous platform, because you're not going to get into their homes. You're certainly, like I mentioned before about oral care research, you're not going to be able to video them in their bathroom at 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, in Austin, Texas, brushing their teeth. These kinds of techniques are super important to get to the moment of where the observation and the feedback are needed. But, you know, don't kill yourself either.
Yeah, if I can add to that, just I know we're pushing, but I think all of this is through the lens of fit for purpose, meaning what are the objectives of the research, and then that's balanced with efficacy and efficiency, right? So what makes the most pragmatic sense to apply these to address the business issue in the best possible way.
Yep. Research objectives for me. I'm sorry, Lenny. Research objectives for me drive the methodologies. So what do we have to learn? What must we know? And what are the ways for us to get that question answered? Drives it. I mean, if somebody can just write it on a piece of paper and get it to us, and I'm doing a paper-based questionnaire today because it's like 3 questions that they're doing it in person. Why should I write an online link, platform link? Just, I can hand tab that data in 20 minutes. So gotta get that fit is correct.
Guys, thanks so much. We're out of time, so we're gonna wrap it up. As we mentioned previously, we'll be emailing out a recording of this webinar, and you can view it as well, along with all the technologies that L&E offers at www.leresearch.com. Thanks for joining us today, and be on the lookout for your email and for your invite to the next webinar that we're hosting in this series. As I mentioned, we will see about getting the questions answered that we did not get to today on the webinar. And thanks again for joining us, and have a great day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. All right. Bye-bye.